Good day, people. So I thought I would give a shout out here to Robert Anton Wilson's book called Prometheus Rising. Now, if you know anything about Robert Anton Wilson, he is a very interesting character, somewhat controversial character. He's done a lot of books, done a lot of stuff on both the Illuminati. He's done a lot of stuff on quantum psychology. His book Cosmic Trigger is, sort of a wonderful classic, as is Sex and Drugs. Prometheus Rising, I think, was roughly the material that was involved in his dissertation and some of the work that he was doing when he was working on some of his very early stuff. It took him many years, and I think it's close to impossible to summarize the book. It's synthetic, and it's summarizing and integrating, I guess, traditions of social psychology with occult theories and quantum stuff. He's also on the fringes of transhumanism through chemical mediation. So I think, if you had to sum it up, it would be he's trying to take basically the work of people like Jung and Freud, and then Leary and all of Leary's work on neurological circuitry, with Gurdjieff's mysticism, Korzybski's time binding, and he is very good at Korzybski and general semantics. I'm going to see if I can lay out some of that. He's also doing a lot of interesting, he's integrating all these together, right? I mean, it's really wild. With Christian Science and how that relates to Crowley's sex magic, and how some of this is related to various yoga breathing practices, and ultimately, I think, how it relates to human development and, I guess, human evolution, but also to conspiracy theory and forms of paranormal activity. So the book it's bordering on science fiction, it's bordering on social commentary, but I think it's a great study for someone who wants a user-friendly, pretty readable introduction to a wide range of multidisciplinary theories regarding why do people do what they do and what makes people, I guess, have the personality types that they have. And so, a couple of things here, I guess. One of it is that he's going to lay out these 8 different neurocircuitry types that Leary developed. And what he does is he walks through the first 4, showing how these first 4 are, we'll say, operative among everyone. They're just sort of the first 4 are basically, the oral and the anal, and then ultimately the phallic stage. He sort of skips over this latency stage that Freud doesn't really address that well, but he's sort of tracking it onto that Freudian schema, but he's also laying out his own like morphological terminology, which he calls viscerotonic, musculotonic, cerebrotonic, and then he doesn't have a moral tonic one, but he's tracking this out to something like the narcissist, the emotionalist, the rationalist, and the moralist. I mean, these are the 4 different sort of orders of imprinting that go on at the neurosemantic level. So in some way, it's a book about neurosemantic reprogramming and what were the critical imprinting factors that went on during various stages of both human evolutionary development and how those came into dominance at certain periods, and then also how, and this is the kind of ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny argument, about how each individual, as they grow and develop, has certain kinds of imprintings and certain dominances of those various circuitries in the first 4 as they're growing up. And so it's somewhat aligned with the development. These first 4 stages are somewhat aligned with the development of the id, the ego, and the superego. They have to do with the crystallization of consciousness out of the unconscious. For Wilson, they have to do with the establishment of the kind of robotic circuitry of personality type that gets sedimented and locked into the person once kinds of imprinting have occurred. Now, I think one of the things to really stress here is that what he's really trying to do more broadly is he's trying to suggest that each person is an artist. And this is where the general semantics comes in. That each person is a kind of artist in the way that they selectively attend and construct this product known as reality. Now, there's certainly something there, and we have various sensory capacities, and we have directive attention, and it's very selective, but what we ultimately experience and what we call reality or the world, or well, you just take those two, reality or the world, what we take those to be, it's not simply a fabrication of the mind, but it's not just objectively there either. There's a kind of transaction, an ongoing give and take that produces an overall construct. And it has to do with not just physiological selective processes. So I mean, there are a whole host of physiological dynamics of sensory awareness of the way colors are created by the eyes in their interaction with different light waves, and the way that temperatures are felt in terms of contrast, and colors as well are registered in terms of localized contextual based contrasts. But it's more than that. It has to do with belief systems, with desires and goals, with orientations, with historical trajectories, which then lead to a selective appropriation of things, a kind of ignoring of things. Like when you open up your computer and you look on, the Weather Channel, where they have lots of different pages and lots of different links all over, you don't see it all simultaneously. Your eye wanders around, and it selects certain items in response or in resonance with your mood, your interest, what you're up to. There's all kinds of things that are going on. But the ongoing give and take of, again, of your circuitry, your background, your goals, and the whole event horizon and all its possibilities there. Well, what happens is, as Wilson will say, is that the difficulty is that what the thinker thinks the prover proves. And these are these sort of fictional terms that he uses for psychological processes. That we think things, and then once we think that, well, then we feel obligated to try to prove that that's the case. So we have a built-in mechanism to try to justify the beliefs we've accumulated, and it becomes a kind of reality tunnel. And, in some way, the book is a primer in reality tunnel awareness. And he's trying to give people the tools and the vocabulary to first become aware of the kinds of reality tunnels that were created for the human species in its evolution, but then for each individual. I mean, these first four circuits of the oral stage, the anal stage, this latency rational stage, and then ultimately the sexual moral stage, these are time periods under which each organism receives a kind of imprint, and that imprint has a potentially a lasting and ongoing effect, and it expresses itself in the interactions of that individual, is in terms of what we call personality, or who someone is, what someone's like. And I think, so, part of the strength of the book is to show how robotic many people are and can be. And the form of that roboticism comes from the key kinds of imprinting that occurred at these different stages. And he then offers, some, and he does his own drawings. I mean, the book is very witty. I think that's, it's part of what you find in the book is, I mean, not only are there very witty drawings that are sort of fun and interesting, but many of them are, when he's giving, for example, the illustrations of the different types here, and here he just lays out the circuit 1 oral imprint and the anal imprint, right? It's really sort of funny. But you see him not only giving his original drawings, but some of them are pretty amazing schematics. I mean, the schematics that he reprints from Leary are quite good. he not only he does some of Burns' transactional interaction sort of stuff, which is also, I mean, he's integrating so many different things here. I think the thing that I would say though is that, so again, the book is a kind of a primer on how to become more aware of the reality tunnels that each of us are in, and there's no escaping from your reality tunnel. At best, you can become aware of it and try to hop to a different one momentarily and become more and more flexible with the realization that you're in a reality tunnel. But then, as Wilson's going to point out, it becomes a kind of snafu where you can't second guess every belief you have. At a certain point, you have to say, well, tentatively, I kind of believe this right now. That is, you can make the borders of the reality tunnel a little more permeable. You can make it a little less of a tunnel, but we're all sort of still caught in reality tunnels. And part of the exercises by which you disclose that to yourself is to actively go engage in taking seriously the beliefs of people who you deeply disagree with, and see how long, through exposing yourself to media and other, we'll call it propaganda and brainwashing material of various ideologies, how long it would take you to convert your views. And again, for Wilson, he's saying, look, to exist is to be brainwashed. You're brainwashed from the get-go, and part of the task is to learn how exactly you were imprinted, that is, scrubbed at various points in your life, and how that's having an effect. And then once you get a little bit further into the book, and this is where I guess it's a little bit more controversial. I think the first part is, it's amazing. I mean, the integration that he's doing is quite impressive. It's it's witty, it's popular. It's not a scholarly book, although I don't think I don't want to take anything away from the real scholarly accomplishment that it is, but it's meant to be accessible to a widest possible audience. It's not a technical book. But he lays out then these more, we'll call it spiritual or mystic circuits, the 5 through 8, and the different. These, I think, are much more controversial. He's going to say that some people will never experience any of them, that whereas all normal adjusted adults go through the imprinting and the establishment of the first 4 circuits, only certain people will develop and establish circuitry for 5, 6, 7, and 8. And 5 is what he calls the holistic neurosemantic circuit, and it's the time where he spends the most, I think, devoted attention to Christian Science. I think it's Mary Baker Eddy or something like that, and he's talking a lot about the way that beliefs play into the body itself, and trying to suggest not by radical faith healing in that sense, but to see how much of illness comes from fear. I mean, I think this is part of what he's suggesting, that, and it has to do with, it's physiological. It has to do with the way the adrenaline glands get activated during fear and flight responses, and the ongoing tax that exerts on the body. And so it's about developing a kind of bodily awareness that I think some people maybe don't devote that much attention to, and perhaps never really become aware of their body, or the degree to which their own breathing, their own orientations, their assumptions and presuppositions are partly leading to the frustrations or the various experiences that they're having. That is, the experiences don't come from the world, they come from some intersection between what the person's assumptions, pre-assessments were, and expectations were, and then what actually shows itself. Okay, the next one he calls the collective neurogenic circuit. Again, I think these are all coming from Leary, but this is most Jungian, sort of talking about synchronicities, and I don't think he's meaning it, although it starts to get ambiguous in these latter chapters where I find myself distancing a little bit from it, but he's sort of talking about how synchronicities occur and what meaning do they have and how do they lead to forms of insight, but also forms of suspicion and forms of double guessing that I guess they bring belief systems and reality tunnels to the forefront. And reality tunnels themselves become more and more objects of awareness. And I guess this is where it leads almost directly into the 7, which is he calls the Metaprogramming Circuit. And this is the one where I think it's almost like a kind of Buddhism, where he's suggesting people become more and more aware of their own emptiness, of the fact that mind is its contents. It's not that there is a mind and then in addition there are the contents. It's the contents are mind. So this isn't one of the examples he uses from the book. This is from another book called Culture, Consciousness, and Beyond by Paul Crismano. I'll see if I can put a reference to that. But it's sort of like this. You imagine a bean goes in, and then a bean stands next to another bean, and then a bean stands next to a bean. And then after a while, you have this whole collection of beans. If you call the collection of beans mind, but each bean is like a thought, it's not that there is a mind in addition to the thoughts. It's just the sum total of the thoughts is what we mean by mind. And to that extent, whatever you're consciously aware of, that is your mind. It's not that your mind is aware of some content, that whatever your mind is aware of, what is the content, that is your mind, right? So if you're listening to a particular piece of music and I say, who are you? Well, if you're going to be true to who you are, when I asked you, you are the piece of music you were listening to. And again, that's one of the examples he uses. The last one that he talks about, and it's the most short, is what he calls non-local quantum circuit. And this is the one where I'm willing to be persuaded, but I'm least persuaded. I think it's for him about radical life extension and a kind of transhumanism that, yeah, I think some of that is possible. I don't know if people are ever going to, quotes, cure death. Even if people could live to be a couple of 100 years old, that will just make the tragedy of death all the more painful. Because people will have imagined that they could have lived so long, but then when it gets cut short, it will seem even more of a loss. But it's a fascinating book, I think, to anyone who wants to learn more about social psychology, personality development, strategies for becoming aware of your own reality tunnel, and how to question it, and have some practical exercises for becoming, I guess, more flexible in your own thinking. It's a great book. He's a great thinker. Provocative, controversial, certainly worth a good study. Okay, thanks.